It's time for Elder Law Matters Radio. Elder law issues can be overwhelming and complicated for families to deal with. Elder Law Matters will demystify all areas of elder law and estate planning through conversation, interviews, and case studies. Each week, partner Melissa Negrin-Weiner will walk you through the twists and turns of planning for your future or caring for an aged loved one. If you want to protect yourself and your family and preserve your assets, or if you're a caregiver for an aged loved one, then Elder Law Matters Radio is for you. Now it's time for Elder Law Matters Radio with your host, Melissa Negrin-Weiner.
Hi, and welcome to Elder Law Matters. I'm Melissa Negrin-Weiner, partner with Cona Elder Law. And this podcast, we talk about things affecting the senior population and things that younger people need to do to make sure they're prepared as they go on and as they grow older, as their family members grow older. What I want to talk about today is kind of a hot topic, and that is that New York State is considering an end to something called spousal refusal. Now, many of you may not be aware of what spousal refusal is. You may not be familiar with it, but what it is it's something that was put in place back in '93, essentially allowing a spouse of an individual who's going on Medicaid to refuse to make their assets available to pay for their spouse's medical care. So if you had a husband and wife, husband was going on Medicaid, he could transfer all of his assets to his spouse to get on Medicaid benefits, and the spouse would then sign something called spousal refusal saying she's not making the money she now has available for medical care purposes for the spouse, that thereby allowing the spouse to go on Medicaid. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the spouse in the community, the well spouse, only has to sign spousal refusal if he or she has more than the allowable amount of money that they can. Medicaid says that they're allowed to have. So this year, that amount is about $120,000, give or take. So basically, without spousal refusal, what you're basically saying is, husband, transfer all of your assets to your wife. You go on Medicaid. Wife, you have to, before your husband can go on Medicaid, you have to spend everything over $120,000 on his care. Now, I see clients every single day. I have people who go on Medicaid every single day. And in all honesty, telling somebody that they have to basically live on it's about $128,000 this year is the number. So somebody in New York, that they have $128,000 in the bank to last them the rest of their life is a really, really scary conversation. It is not something that I think would even be possible. So, the concerns that we're reading in the news and the concerns that Governor Cuomo was putting forward, basically saying that there are people who have millions and millions of dollars and their spouse is in a nursing home on Medicaid. I mean, are there people taking advantage that have millions and millions of dollars? Probably. But really what this is aimed to do is protect basically the middle class. You cannot live on $128,000 in New York State. What if you have a wife, in my scenario, what if the wife is 70 years old and the husband is 85? She still has a lot of life to live, and leaving her with that meager amount of money is really going to be a problem. And what it's going to do is cause more government benefits. They're going to apply for things like HEAP and food stamps and other things because there's not enough money to cover just regular expenses. I mean, in Nassau County, people can, spend a good amount of that money on their taxes every year. So, I can understand the concern of, people who, quote unquote, take advantage of the system. But I think that there needs to be somebody taking a look at the bigger picture here, and basically the American, the middle class. We rely on spousal refusal as important part of eligibility planning. If a couple can't sign spousal refusal, and this was what was happening before spousal refusal was put into place, a lot of couples will get divorced in order to protect assets. So now we're talking about loving couples who are devoted to each other, who have been married for 50, 60 years, and they're going to contemplate divorce in order to preserve what they've worked so hard for, rather than being able to utilize the spousal refusal. And there are measures in place for the counties to come back to the spouse for contribution towards the cost of care. But it's helping the middle class families who have to contend with skyrocketing health care costs, and really stopping couples from having to spend their entire savings really is so important. So this is an ongoing situation here. I've been practicing elder law now for close to 20 years, and I can tell you that at least 5 governors have attempted to repeal spousal refusal. So this is a wait and see. This comes up every year, and to date, we've been able to keep it intact. So we have to wait and see what happens. But there seems to be a lot more talk about it this year. There's also a lot of talk, about people saying things like, if someone has that kind of money, they should just buy health insurance. Well, health insurance, regular health insurance, doesn't pay for long-term care. So then they say, okay, well, if you have money, then you should be buying long-term care insurance. Well, not everybody can qualify for long-term care insurance. There's a lot of medical issues that could prohibit people from qualifying for long-term care insurance, and they may be at the point where it's too late for them to buy it. Maybe their kids can buy it when they see what's happening, but for they themselves, maybe their health condition or their age is going to prohibit them from buying the long-term care insurance at this point. So, while people think that these are quick and easy solutions, they really are not. So, again, we're going to keep an eye on this. We'll come back with updates. I am sure if as soon as we hear anything, we will, have another show about it. But I just wanted to make sure that our listeners were aware of what was going on and how this could really change the landscape of Medicaid coverage and especially nursing home coverage. Our guest on today's show is Charlie Massimo. He is the founder and CEO of CJM Wealth Management, which is an independent advisory firm. And Charlie and I go way back. We've worked together for many years, and he's here today to talk to us a little bit about retirement planning. Good afternoon, Charlie. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Melissa.
Thank you for joining us. So I want to just start off by talking about something that just passed, over in January. Can you talk a little bit about the Secure Act and what it means for our clients who are planning for retirement?
Sure. Well, I think the Secure Act really affects people in many different ways. First, it allows you to extend minimum distributions. Instead of having to take a required minimum distribution at 70 and a half, it can now extend it till 72, which means you get another additional year and a half or so of accumulating tax-deferred growth, which is always a nice thing. Continue to contribute to your 401k regardless of how long you work for a company, which is a nice change. I think the biggest downside is the loss of a stretch IRA. And let me explain what that means. Prior to the act passing, if I were to pass away and leave my retirement, my IRA, to my children, prior to the act, they were allowed to stretch it out over their lifetime. For instance, if when I passed my daughter was 40 and her life expectancy was 80, she was able to stretch out the distributions for 40 years. Really, it's a minimal tax bite because all those dollars are taxed at ordinary income. However, now with the Secure Act, you're forced to stretch those dollars out over 10 years. So again, if I had $1 million in my IRA and I passed away, regardless of the age of my children, they would have to take that distribution out over 10 years, which can add a significant income tax bite for their future, meaning that most of those dollars would be lost to taxes. So that's really where a lot of the planning should occur, especially with someone like you on the estate planning side, to look at the type of trusts or workarounds that clients can utilize based on this change to with the Secure Act.
So if you're saying if your daughter was to inherit that IRA and she has to take out, well, how much was it per year?
Well, with the new act, so let's just say I have $1 million, she'd have to take out $100,000 a year over 10 years.
Okay, so if she's working and she has a job and she's making $250,000 a year, now she's making $350,000 a year?
Exactly. That's all ordinary income. That's why most of this, or a lot of this, will now be lost to taxes, which is why the government did it. Right? They needed some avenues to gain more tax dollars, and this was one big area. Which is why we're coaching a lot of our clients to look at Roth IRAs that are tax-free dollars with no minimum distributions, or workarounds such as trust planning that you can help with, or even high-value life insurance policies with high cash values, which also come out as tax-free dollars.
Interesting. So all these people who have been putting money into their IRAs over the years to be able to retire, to pass along, now have this ahead of them.
Yeah, it's such a misnomer, not a misnomer, but the younger we are, certainly growing dollars tax deferred makes sense. But the older we get, continuing to contribute to tax deferred dollars really is not a wise choice to make, because our partners in that is not our family. Our partners in that qualified dollars are the IRS, which is why they'll wait for that money until you die, because they're going to collect a lot more of it in taxes. So you just really need to understand the pros and cons and look toward possibly a different way of planning for those IRA dollars. Okay.
And how about people who are a bit younger, maybe paying for their children's college, and really worried about having enough money to retire, especially those of us living here in New York, and wanting to have enough money to retire and wanting to leave something to their family? I mean, what should they be thinking about? What should they be looking at?
Yeah, we hear that a lot, and you're right, Melissa. I mean, in our part of the world where we live, our taxes and everything else continue to go up. They never seem to go down. So I think first and foremost is to start as young as possible. I mean, the greatest advantage we have, or the greatest asset we have, is time. So the more time we have to save and accumulate dollars for retirement or for college, the better off we are. But saying if we didn't start early enough, really take a look at your resources. What other dollars can you pull from to help pay for college while not impacting your own retirement, such as home equity loans. Look for high cash value life insurance policies to borrow from. And you really have to take an inventory, and don't go it alone. I mean, really look to sit down and plan the future so that you really don't get into a point where you're 5 years from retirement, all of a sudden you can't afford it. So it's no different. You can start saving dollars and using age to our advantage, the better off we would be. And the second thing, or the other thing I would say, segment out your planning. So many times we'll have clients come to us and all their dollars are commingled. There's no dollars that are earmarked for college versus earmarked for retirement. So the first thing you need to do is kind of separate out your planning and have a very specific plan for college needs and have a very specific plan for your own retirement needs. Because once you understand what you have, clarity becomes a little easier to plan for it versus just commingling all your dollars that you're saving.
That makes sense, because it seems like if you have it in one pile, you use it first for whatever comes up first, and then you use it for whatever comes up next, and you have nothing for the next potential thing. That
it's so true. Yeah, and then what happens is you wind up panicking. This is great. We're talking at a time where we're impacted by something called the coronavirus, right? Where the market has sold off considerably, and if you didn't have the right allocation, meaning if you didn't have the right mixture between stocks and bonds, and you were near retirement, now all of a sudden you're panicking because you feel you have to catch up, and that's a really bad mistake that many people make. So again, understand what your allocations are, understand what you're planning for, and most importantly, understand what your time frames are to achieve your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're working with a family, do you have a general rule of how often you meet with your clients, how often people should meet with their advisor?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really varies from people to people. But our general rule in the first year of any relationship you have with an advisor, you should meet at least 4 times a year to get very comfortable and understand and kind of to create a rhythm together. Because I can pick up the phone and ask somebody a question and they can answer it, but unless I really see how they're truly feeling about it, right? And the goal is never to be surprised. You as a client should never be surprised by what your advisor is doing, and me as an advisor should never be surprised by what my client is doing that will impact their portfolio or change in their portfolio. So meeting on a quarterly basis, unless there's emergencies, you may want to meet more than that, but really 4 times a year is ample to do it. Now, that doesn't mean you should check your portfolio every day to see what's going on, because the more you check your portfolio, the more panic and anxiety you may feel. But I really think 4 times a year, and have an agenda, go to the meeting with a set agenda with the questions you want to ask. And don't make the questions solely around returns of my portfolio. Make the questions more around, are we on target? Do you really understand what my goals are? And how are you helping me get there? And what are the other services you may be able to provide me as my advisor? And I always tell this to my clients, and it's probably similar for you, Melissa. It's a very intimate relationship we share with our clients. And if you can't be open and honest, and if you don't view it as an intimate relationship, probably one of the most intimate you'll have outside of your immediate family, it will not be a successful relationship.
I agree with that 100%. Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. Can you just leave our listeners with what you feel is your most important piece of advice for someone who's planning to retire in the next couple of years?
I would say don't panic in bad markets. Don't over panic in bad markets, and don't get greedy in good markets. We say this a lot. If you're an emotional investor, you cannot be a successful investor. So try to keep your emotions in check. Understand how the markets work, but make sure you pick an allocation that's right for you based on where you are in your life.
And I'm right in that you would sit down with somebody to kind of go through, the right thing for them too, based on kind of their personality, right? What they can handle and what they can't.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can have 2 couples that are both 65-year-old and both ready 5 years in retirement, but they have 2 different risk tolerances and they have 2 different goals. So when somebody asks me, what is your return of your portfolio? I always say that's the wrong question, because everybody's going to have a different portfolio based on their own needs. So, it's a little bit of science to really understand what the right portfolio is for the client. It's all about truly understanding their needs.
Right. And that's why we love people like you, because you know how to do that. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you joining us, and we hope to talk to you again. And now we're going to go to Jennifer Cona.
How do you feel about telehealth? That's where you can have a healthcare visit, a doctor appointment, or even get a physical exam over the computer or smartphone. Most major health systems now offer telehealth services, but studies show that people age 50 to 80 are not buying in. Some concerns include that the quality of care will not be as good, that a physical exam would be impossible, that people will feel disconnected from their health care provider, and many people had privacy concerns. In reality, more than 50% of those surveyed did not even know if their doctors offered telehealth visits. So what about you? Would you be comfortable with a telehealth checkup? How about for emergency care? Like if you had strep throat or the flu. Imagine not having to go out to the doctor on a snowy, icy day if your doctor could see you over the computer and call in a prescription. I'd love to know how our listeners feel about it. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Email me at elder@genserlaw.com and let me know what you think. But here's something else to consider. This is a generational issue that is wrought with trouble if families don't keep the lines of communication open. Let me explain. I may be perfectly comfortable with a telehealth visit. I'm a busy professional. I do most things via webcam, whether it's work meetings or talking to my kids. It's routine, efficient, and a more than adequate way for me to get things done. However, Mom does not have the same frame of reference. As Mom's caregiver, if I insist that Mom have a telehealth visit instead of taking her to the doctor, Mom may feel that I don't have time for her, that work is more important than taking her to the doctor, that I'm not taking her health concerns seriously, that I'm not a good caregiver, that she's a burden, and a whole host of other unintended things. So instead, I need to talk to Mom. I need to ask if she's okay with a telehealth visit. I have to share with her how it works for me and see if she's willing to try it. We simply need to communicate about it openly and honestly so we each know where the other person is coming from so there are no misunderstandings. And of course, I need to respect Mom's decision. If you need help with family communications, our Elder Law Mediation Department can help. You can also find our communication tips on our website, genserlaw.com. That's GENSERLAW.com. You can go to the Resources tab and look for our free compassion tips to help with communication.
Thank you again for joining us on this episode of Elder Law Matters. And please remember to check out our website at genserlaw.com and check us out on social media. We have a great social media page, Facebook page that is chock full of information. Also, if you have any questions you want to ask me directly, you can email me at melissa@genserlaw.com. Look forward to speaking with you all again soon.
Thank you for listening to Elder Law Matters, the only show that talks about elder law and estate planning. For more information, check us out at genserlaw.com.